doing? We're going to get started. It's 1 o'clock, and it's so great to see so many people show up here. Lots of new faces in the crowd today, so thank you all for being here, and always good to see so many familiar faces as well. This is the first Artist Talk of the year, the first show of the year, featuring Steve Justice. Thanks for being here, and welcome to Studio Kroner. We're entering our 4th year of being here in this location. Actually, there was no location before this, what am I saying? So short story is I was looking for bigger studio space and got a gallery. So I started Studio Kroner in April of 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic, and it's been fun to see it grow. I had the pleasure of meeting Steve through a friend of the gallery, Lou Epstein, who has been a part of this endeavor in this journey with me since the beginning, and has been kind enough to sponsor a couple events here, and he will be sponsoring an event here in April. So thanks, Lou, for introducing me to Steve. Steve sent me an email, and I looked at his work, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
He knew.
I'm going to have to meet you and see this work in person. And I'm not the only person who's had this reaction, but this work, when you see it in person, is just sort of blows you away. It's really cool online, but then you see it in person, you see the scale of it, you see the intricacy of it, you see the layering, the contextual layering, the graphical aesthetic layering of it, and it really is impactful. And I feel really honored to have Steve agree to be a part of a show here. So we're just going to get a conversation started here. This is Steve Justice.
Hello.
And I like to get these started just trying to get a sense of who Steve is, where you came from, and how you got to this place. So,
Who is Steve Justice? Okay, I won't do that.
So, just want to sort of get an introduction to who you are, and you've got some Cincinnati roots, but you're recently sort of a boomeranger to Cincinnati.
Actually, yeah.
As I am myself. So,
and this is being taped?
This is being taped.
So the Steve-olution will be televised.
The Steve-olution will be televised.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, if you sign up, you'll get a link to the YouTube video of this, hopefully next week sometime.
Yeah, so save your cat calls until the end. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm from Pittsburgh. And that's, no, I began studying art at a very early age. My parents were very supportive, although they were not artists, and really didn't know what was going on. But they had a lot of faith, and they also had some artsy friends, close friends of theirs, who they'd check in. Is this okay? Is this kid okay? And they say, yeah, just let him keep doing what he's doing, So I have these drawings from when I was 2 and 3. Still have them. The first show was when I was 4. I was so proud of my drawings that I glued them to the wall with school paste. That real good tasting school paste. And it showed my parents, and they had to very nice. You want to discourage me, But we're going to have to scrape these off the wall and repaint the wall now. And here's a bulletin board. We'll buy you a bulletin board, because the fridge magnets hadn't been invented yet. I'm surprised.
You're that old?
Yeah. And my father, the engineer, he should have thought, let's go to the hardware store and we'll get some magnets. And yeah. No, that never happened. His family goes way back into West Virginia, Kentucky, England. Got to this country in 1654, which is a while back. For your reference, who was it who wrote the inscription on the Statue of Liberty? Emma. Yeah. Sorry about that. Her family got here in 1654 too. Jewish, great poet from Spain, Portugal area. So, we might have been on the same boat. I don't know. My mother's family was Finnish, 100% Finnish. Got here in that big wave of immigration around 1900, and I'm still learning about them. They go way back, Viking blood, Viking A-listers. And they came over, laborers, communists, labor leaders. I'm now learning. It's an exciting trip. So when I was old enough, when I was in, say, junior high, I was selected by one of my many alert teachers to go to the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh, which was a big museum, Carnegie money, and where they had Saturday art classes. Kids from all over town would get there. And I did that for, that and then the Carnegie Mellon follow-up was for like 6 years. And boy, was that a good training. Joseph Fitzpatrick was also Warhol's teacher. So he's the one who secured the scholarship for Warhol to go to Carnegie Tech. Warhol went to New York and was making an absolute killing doing fashion illustration in New York. Like $200,000 a year in 1959 dollars, which wasn't bad. And then he started doing the pop art thing, And I'm glad he did. But this teacher of ours, though, he wanted us to walk before we could run. He's a very conservative guy, and he'd turn us loose, and we'd draw the dioramas and dinosaur bones around the museum and such, and come back on alternating weeks and do paintings, and listen to his lectures, which were always like very, very, very gentle and very wholesome, and he's a strict guy. I hung on every word, which wasn't cool to do at the time because it was like 1969 in Oakland and Pittsburgh with the universities and literally protests right across the street. There was a lot of excitement, the head shops and everything. And a lot of kids would skip school and do that, but this is too good. Then, let's see, that brought me up to, I'm going to go to college. I was like, ordained at birth, pretty much. What are you going to study? And, I asked my art teacher, guidance counselors, and they say, well, there's commercial. You have two choices, commercial art or architecture, But I have a very wise uncle who is is Uber engineer, born in Germany, very, very good. And he was wise, he said, no. For you, industrial design. I looked into it. And UC kept coming up. They had this co-op program, and the price was right, and reputedly the best in the country, and it was like a no-brainer, And not a hard transition because Cincinnati and Pittsburgh are very, very similar. Rust Belt of big factories and neighborhoods surrounded by hollows, and you drive into Hyde Park here, and you can almost like trace where the streetcar used to go. Very similar to Pittsburgh that way. The ethnicities, Pittsburgh, they had more Southern and Eastern Europeans, but they're the Irish, the Germans, Italians, and very, very similar. I did well at UC. It got a little tiresome. The co-op program got tiresome. I was having successful experiences with Sears and Goodyear, but moving every 3 months was a disaster socially, just a total disaster, And I had to fix that myself, and with some encouragement from others. I might as well tell you the Vietnam vet story now. I was in my junior year at school, changing classes outside Zimmer Auditorium, if you're familiar with the UC campus, and I can't proceed. I can't go any further. And I was just sitting there feeling sorry for myself, and this big Vietnam vet came, and we knew who these guys were. They were like, 30 going on 50, and beards, and you knew who they were. And he was smoking a cigarette, and he just threw it down. And said, yeah, damn it. And came over and got in my face and said, you're going to sit there, you got to do something about it. And I'm thinking, yeah, I didn't say a thing, you know. And he was so pissed and he like went storming off, you know. And boy, did I feel like a crybaby then, you know. I said, man, what this guy's probably seen, you know. And I'm crying because my teacher, you know, slighted me on a grade on a project. Come on, you know. And that just turned it around, you know. So right out of school, I took the job, my last co-op job at Goodyear for convenience sake. And it was a lot of fun. You know, 2 years in Akron's enough. So there was that. It did well. Moved to Columbus and had some good years there. Not, no pun intended. Ultimately working for Lancaster Colony, who some of you might know owned Indiana Glass and Candlelight, who worked out of Blue Ash here. Started painting on the side. You know, I thought, I have the time. This is like a 40-hour job with, you know, no extra demands on the weekends or anything like that. So I'm going to paint, you know. And I was drifting back towards art like that. My wife, Dr. Lorraine Justice, who's here today, she's in the back there. Stand up, will you? No, no, just kidding. Yeah, so I started painting and just these immediate little successes, you know. Our gallery seat in Columbus just so happened to be booming at the time in the short north. I was getting into show after show after show after show there. And I thought, well, geez, you know, I have these gallery listings. Let's see if I could get into like other people's regional shows. And I was doing that and just racking up shows, you know. And then I got to the point where, well, you know, why am I doing this? You know, after a while. But by then, see, we'd moved to Atlanta. See, we're following her career moves because Lorraine was going to school. She's got a PhD. She's a department head at Ohio State. And now she's going to be a department head at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. So we had 7 years there. Our daughter was born in Columbus. Yeah, so Atlanta was fun. Driving was no good, you know. And then this opportunity to become a dean at Hong Kong Poly U came up, you know, and we looked at it and studied it carefully, you know. Geez, there's got to be a catch. And, you know, they invited Lorraine out 2 times and then the rest of the family out and, you know, there's no catch. They're going to pay our housing, you know, and that's like a big perk in Hong Kong. It's the most expensive housing in the world, you know. And they don't want you to like convert. They have all these old factories, you know, plastics factories. If you remember when we were kids, you know, you'd look at a toy that said made in Hong Kong and we'd, yeah, it's cheap. You know, those old buildings would have been great studios, office, you know, lofts, but no, they weren't allowed to. They had to like start afresh with building, you know, and build like, we lived in a 47-story apartment house overlooking the harbor, you know. But that was a real experience, of course, being a minority in another country. And, well, I'm only going to go there once, but we were treated so kindly there, you know. I had to downscale my painting. You know, all my paintings were in storage. All of our worldly goods in the States were in storage in Atlanta. And we didn't know if we were going to come back to Atlanta, you know. So this is what life was kind of like. So we did come back and unpack our storage and moved to Rochester, where Lorraine was a dean at RIT for a long time, 11 years. And they have a great arts community there, not a big town at all, you know, like Akron size maybe, or, you know, 200,000 person range, less, you know. But, you know, they just welcomed me into the art community there. It was very, very nice. I didn't have to, like, send things off to these, you know, Boise local shows and stuff like that. And, you know, I had like big show after big show, 2 in a row one time in Rochester, and I was, thought I was always the Minuteman, and I told everybody, if you need a show, if you need someone to fill in, I could be ready in 2 days, And sure enough, this one big show ended, and then somebody said, "We have a cancellation, Steve." So okay, I'll be there in 2 days. It had to be a different show though. So what I did was I got all the female subjects I ever did, and they're probably like 25 at least, and I'm going to call it like Ladies' Night Out, and just do like all the female subjects that I had. The ones you see here, Greta and. Well, this one wasn't done yet. That's Jane Goodall with Johnny Weissmuller. And I didn't just make this up. Jane Goodall, she got into her thing because she loved Tarzan. She said Tarzan married the wrong Jane, is what she always said. Yeah, so we have Johnny Weissmuller, to thank for that. And I picked on him a couple times in these paintings. It's kind of a strange thing.
So I wanted to ask you a question. I want to go back to something you talked about earlier about being on campus and watching demonstrations taking place. You told me
in Oakland, in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Which was, first of all, the art. I was an art student. I had time before my class with this. Conservative traditional teacher, time after. Well, what did I do? There's a library there, and I'm a library junkie still. But, you bum around Oakland, a college town, and there are these head shops and the comics, seeing all the comics, and the comics were like all over Carnegie Mellon. Every bathroom stall had a stack of head comics, and that was some really, really great art, By then I thought, Mad Magazine was about as wild as things got, up until then. But then a 15-year-old kid reading Freak Brothers and stuff like that. And then rock posters. I still love the rock posters, And somebody earlier said something about the color, and I will lead into the color, I admit that. But a lot of that comes from just the rock posters popping off the wall. And, white brick. I saw this gallery and I thought, I've been here before. My first shows, like 4 of the first 10 shows I had were in galleries with brick walls, and these things, they just like punch holes in the wall, And I actually started like drawing frames on a lot of them. I don't do that so much anymore, just because they, punch a hole in the wall.
So is that whole influence of that era of comics and stuff like that obviously influenced you?
Right, yeah.
Like, did you have particular artists that that genre you were following?
Well, there were names, but see, I was always attuned to art history too. Thomas Hart Benton, if you're familiar with his art from the WPA in the 30s and 40s, and you'll see a lot of this distortion, and even he didn't invent that. I mean, Michelangelo, the hand of God like this, come on, he's a cartoonist. You look at the Sistine ceiling, there's nothing real about any of that, and everything's exaggerated. And this is not criticism at all. I think he's a genius. Less successful would have been Jackson Pollock doing the Sistine ceiling, doing dribble painting. Never mind.
But Jackson Pollock had a big influence on you.
Yeah. Actually, I was designing, doing little doodles. I started doing that in college, ink doodles. And, you pass them around, haha, very good, Steve, funny, yeah. I wasn't going to be a cartoonist or an editorial cartoonist because, I always ran so hot and cold, And editorial cartoonists cannot run hot and cold. I loved their work. I loved, is it Boardman here in town? Yeah. When I was in school, I'd buy the paper almost every day just to look at that and Reds baseball. And McNally from Chicago was another excellent one. And he also had time to do the shoe comic, if you remember that, in the funny papers. But in the morning they do their research. Afternoon they draw. Evening goes to press. Next day, punch time clock. Morning research. Draw the cartoon to press. It's like and you got to keep up with the times. You can't be like Ernie Bushmiller, guy who drew Nancy. He would work 1 year in advance. Of course, you look at his comics, and they are like drills and and timeless. There's like nonsensical now as they were 75 years ago. But he could work that far in advance. And then, if he wanted to take a vacation, he could and stuff like that. And, I like bump up against politics in my paintings a little bit, but a lot of times politics doesn't have a very good shelf life. So something's a little bit different a few years later, and that, all of a sudden you're doing something that's like obsolete or incorrect or, something like that.
Do you see yourself as a historian, a graphical historian?
Well, yeah, that's a genetic disorder in my family. History. In the past 10
Pray
years,
tell.
I've been keeping a log. In the past 10 years, at the end of this year, I will have read, I'm guessing 600 books in the past 10 years, all nonfiction. So they're biographies, and I love biographies of crackpots and creative people. But just sometimes I get on this history thread. Like last year, I was doing ancestry, and one thing led to another, and it's immigration and labor, and just all this, and a lot of it's going to trickle out into paintings this year. There will be an Emma Lazarus painting. There will be one of my grandfather standing on a Viking ship, whatever sense that makes. There will be trouble. There will be blood.
Are you feeling inspired by current events for any new imagery?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of it. A lot of times I've been staying away from darker subjects. I've been trying to. I'll be cynical. But I used to laugh my way past the graveyard. What's the expression? Billy the Kid. But I don't want to paint myself into a coroner.
Yeah, into a corner.
Yeah, no, but
Bada bing, bada boom.
yeah, but things are coming up. Immigration, that certainly is one.
Yeah.
Minorities. When I went to China, people say, "Steve, what did you miss most about the U.S.?" And I will tell them. I'll say it now, and I said it then. I miss our minorities. Just the rich cultures and their contributions and their assets.
So I wanted to ask you, what was a bigger cultural shock from you, living in the South or living in Hong Kong?
Well, moving south was an eye-opener. Although, Atlanta's it's really the South, but not the South. Hong Kong, of course, was different. And didn't need a car. Apartment dwelling we were on the 43rd floor, I think. Didn't miss a car. There's nowhere to go anyway. Rapid transit was right there. And you get spoiled. You miss a train and this light comes up at 3 minutes till the next one. And you think, oh man, how am I gonna pass the time? I have to wait 3 minutes now. Things like that, and just the kindness of the people. And it was an experience. The urban living. And it was truly, and then the weekend trips. Vietnam is right there, India right there. Everything was just so close. Mainland, of course. It was just pretty amazing. Tokyo, great experience.
How did Hong Kong, living in that culture, influence your artwork?
Well, for one thing, it was a space thing, limited space, and I thought I can't paint here. I tried to. I think paintings right before Virginia Woolf, but they were small. Water-based oil paint, which I just hate. It's like painting with dirt, just the feel was awful, I thought. And I thought, well, I can't make a career out of this, so I'm just going to draw. And then I found this guy who would photocopy my sketches onto smooth watercolor paper, and I got liquid watercolors. I started to, and some of these are still around. There are people in this very room who have copies hanging on their walls. So I was doing that, little drawings. And it was okay, it got me over that, what am I going to do with my art question. But I came back and I had this enormous backlog of sketches too. Now some of those prints, they turned into big paintings, and others I adapted and others I just ignored, But it was like a good fertile mine. I could mine my old drawings, sift through my old bone pile, for material, which was pretty cool. But even that got old though, because it is fun to and I mentioned it's like feeding a machine. In this end are the books and things fall out, and there's a lot of processing. Start with a little sketch, and then what I ask myself, and you can't just be like a dumb portrait of somebody. You could add a message, without getting ridiculous.
Can you walk us through some of these process boards?
Yeah, well, okay. I wish they were here completely, but for instance, behind Anime Wong here, you're all familiar with this iconic picture of, is it Promontory? Yeah, Promontory Summit, where they drove in the Golden Spike to connect the railroad. Now the western third was built by Chinese labor, and that was a tough part. The losses were massive, because they're blasting their way through rock and everything like that, and that's why it was only a 1/3. The eastern 2/3, they were like zipping along at a mile a day, and they met at Promontory Summit, and it was Stanford, who owned the railroad, said, okay, thank you, Chinese workers. As part of your severance package, you get a one-way ticket to anywhere but here, So they, went to New York, LA, San Francisco, and Chinatowns, and set up their own supporting communities or support system. I thought, oh, geez, I'm going to rewrite history here and make everyone Chinese, and which is where the pain came out. And Anime Wong herself, her family, this is just a color study. I had a bunch of them. Her family came over to mine gold, and wound up in the usual support roles, food service and laundry, stuff like that in L.A. But being in L.A., she got the movie bug like a lot of kids in L.A. Marilyn Monroe, the list is long. Dennis Hopper, kids, they grew up in L.A., and that's what you walked into. That was your industry. That was your local industry, So she got into silent movies, but she always had to play like the Dragon Lady or the villain, or all these like negative roles. Never a leading role. She could have had the lead role in The Good Earth, that Pearl Buck story. She could have had the lead role in that, but no, they got a white actor in yellow face, and she would have won an Academy Award, I think. But and because of movie codes, she wasn't allowed to kiss the leading man. So if that did happen, she had to die in the movie. These are the rules. So, if the leading man even looked at her, lustfully, she had to die. It's just like really twisted, so twisted. This story of immigrants. Good thing things aren't like that now.
They could be again.
No.
Sorry.
Paul. And then Carissa Moore, surfer girl, she won the gold medal in surfing in 2020, the first time they had surfing in the Olympics. And I just, thought, native Hawaiian, she's native, goes to Japan and walks off with a gold medal. There's a kind of a tag back there in a way, for one thing. But, I said, well, let's just honor her. I didn't know how, so I got, the Japanese, and, this, I didn't invent all this. I adapted this from those, what was his name, Hokusai and those other Japanese printmakers. The crashing waves and, the whirlpool, which I just did that for my own edification. Get it? Let me go through more?
Yeah. I think these are fascinating.
Yeah.
The reason I enjoy this is, this is every one of these shows, I'm always interested in where the confluence of people's design and artwork meets.
Well, it's interesting because Paul and I overlapped at UC. I didn't know him there. He didn't know me, but we overlapped by 2 years. And he was just upstairs in the graphics department, the whole time. Probably, behaving. Unlike us. Not just charging fire extinguishers. Frederick and Susan B., they're icons. Rochester. And that's why they're all paired there together. That's pure Rochester. And I thought 7 Susans. Boy, that's like a sexist nightmare, wouldn't it be? So that I thought, okay, now what if they were red and yellow, black and white? They're precious as. So I thought 7 Susans, and then I thought, 5 Fredericks. That's how that came about. Because Frederick Douglass, he was bad, he just was tough, took no nonsense. You never see a picture of him smiling, because he'd say, "Well, what's there to be happy about?" You're not paying attention if you think I should be smiling. Great man, great thinker. This is actually one of my favorite backstories. Online, if you look these up, there's like a full page backstory to each one. It's in serious need of editing, but keep that in mind. But a lot of it's, the three E's. I like to entertain, educate, and enlighten. And you can learn a lot. Everybody still paying attention? But this is George Squire, General George Squire, who learned communications in World War I and came back with a brilliant idea of sending music across phone wires into offices and factories and stores, and he invented music pretty much. And it grew from that idea. So he should be everybody's hero. But
so let's just walk through that whole thought process. Like, where did you learn about him? And going back to your initial thing, you're like, and why? A
lot of these start with the reading, like I said. This one actually started with the image. A magazine. Just I thought, boy, that looks like Sergeant Pepper, but no, it's not. That's George Squire. What about him? And I read more and more about him, and it just like, what a weird story it became. Because here he is in his uniform, but after a while, he wasn't even in the military, but he still like went around with his uniform all. We all know people like that. But Muzak, I thought of the wallpaper in my doctor's office when I was a kid in the 70s, and that's what this is. I was like, let's see, hokey wallpaper, So I was flicking through these old wallpaper swatches. I said, that's from Dr. Hoffmeister's office, Then through the magic of overlays, then, okay, he has that in the background, yeah, but his uniform turns into camo, his face turns into highlights and shadows, you know, but the pattern just doesn't stop, you know. And for some reason, I thought it could use a frame, so I put a frame around it, an inappropriate frame, yeah. People never think of that, you know, this gold fancy frame, it goes with everything? Are you sure? And the Henry Aaron, that one is right there. And that one started with the image too. Of course, you know, I was studying Negro League Baseball at the time. And he was there, south, you know, moved up north to Milwaukee to play professional baseball. But the image I saw, I thought, I actually started tracing over top of it, and everything like lined up, and I said, well, this is like Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, you know. It's just like perfect, a perfect athletic specimen, you know. And the other thing about that is, why does he have a hammer? You know, well, they called him Henry the Hammer. But that started out, I had this triptych in mind, and one was going to be John Ford, the movie director. That painting is here. Henry Ford, that painting is not here, it's at home, and it's not very complimentary. And I thought, and then John Henry. See, all three characters are linked by their names. You know, John Henry Ford, you know. But this turned into Henry Aaron, you know, from John Henry to Henry Aaron somehow. And so I spoiled my own project that way. I'll never get over that. Okay. Then Mark Twain, he's buried in Elmira, New York, near the Finger Lakes, not far from Rochester. Why was he buried there? His wife was from there, from Elmira. She had money, and she was already dead and buried there. He had children who died and buried there. The one child died when he was on a world tour, speaking tour, because he lost all his money on Page's Compositor. Yeah, he was an old newspaper man. Type was all hand set, right? And that's very hard to like set type and then sort it back into the uppercase and lowercase boxes. So this Page guy had this machine where you could just like type, you know, and it sets a type. But it was like prone to breakdowns. It had like 30,000 pieces or parts or something like that. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a Studebaker has 30,000 parts. Yeah. Page's Compositor had 18,000. And he got burned. He got burned on that. He like invested like $5,000, which was like $155,000 in today's money, and lost it all. And that was his royalties from Huck Finn, and lost. So he went on this 9-year world tour, during which one of his children died. And he's too busy to come home. He was in the Far East. And that's from the John Ford painting. I love Western art, and this is just a couple spots here. There's a John Ford painting back in the corner. And just the skies, with this amazing shitstorm going on in the background, and, the wide open space. And you go there, and you think, it really is like that, In fact, it's rare to see just one storm, I mean, I remember standing on a mountain looking out over the desert in New Mexico and seeing, counting 7. These black, they look like mushroom clouds, and they're rainstorms. Jim Thorpe. Again, I was picking on the ledger, old ledger art trick. And they're like, they were like me. They drew on what they could get their mitts on. We used to draw on computer paper at school. The green and white line stuff, if we're lucky, we can get the stuff that wasn't used. Virgin paper, when they stack it out and no one was looking, we'd walk off with it. and you draw it, you know. Otherwise, we'd have to like get into the recycled paper, you know, with the figures on the other side of it. Tenzing Norgay, who climbed Mount Everest with Hillary. He's Hillary's Sherpa. My theory is he'd probably been there many, many, many times, him and his friends. Hillary, you know, he wasn't the only climber. You know, they start with a team of climbers, and like the best horse on a track will make the final assault. So, you know, the other climbers were tired. Hillary still had something left. So Norgay took him up. Now there are lots of pictures of him on top of Everest. There are no pictures of Hillary on top of Mount Everest. So you make the call. But the equipment, you know, these kids, you know, with the mountaineers in Nepal, they latch on all the surplus equipment left behind there, the boots and the goggles and the ropes, and they just like to jock around wearing that stuff, you know. Every kid wanted to be a mountain climber. It's probably still that way, I don't know.
I think there are quite a few artists in the room and painters, and they might be as surprised as I was that these are painted in oil and not acrylic. And they've got the chroma value of acrylic, and you know, certainly the line work one might associate with somebody working in acrylic. I'm wondering why these are in oil, not acrylic. What's that decision about for you?
Well, actually, like I said, I started painting with my wife's oil paint, you know, and I didn't, you know, it wasn't like a mindless habit. I like the feel and smell, you know. And in fact, sometimes just to get started, just like hanging out in the studio and smelling the paint will like trigger all kinds of mayhem.
Huffing.
Oh, I don't know about that. But like Winsor Newton oils dry faster than they ever used to. You know, the dryers in them are better. And I'm used to working on maybe 4 at a time. You know, I'll do the colors I'm working on, like colors I'm most sure of till I'm least sure of, and if I really don't know, I'm not going to be arbitrary. I'll set it aside until it tells me what color, you know, I need to be using. So there's like drying time, and I'll move on to another painting, and you know, the system works. During the year of our move, 2023, things really slowed down. And I wasn't working on 4 at a time, and I was barely working on 1 at a time, and they're picking up again, you know, and it feels great when you're working on many projects at once, you know. It feels like more of a continuity, like you're part of a wheel.
Well, it also taps into your design career where you might have 75 projects going on,
well,
or, you know.
See, precisely, yeah. And I can juggle projects, and I always like working fast. But when I was designing Lancaster Colony, glassware, I literally worked on maybe 45, as many as 75 projects at a time, you know, in various stages. Now, some of them were back burner, you know, but, you know, I could juggle that way. And the trick there is, you know, you might get inspired on this painting, and you want to save that inspiration for this painting and maybe not apply it to that painting, you know, so there's this compartmentalizing, you know, it's almost like you need blinders. Or, you know, or not. Maybe I'm missing a lot of great opportunities. Maybe I'm stunting my own growth.
I'm going to open it up to the floor.
Are there any hidden objects in your paintings?
No.
No hidden objects.
No. You know, that's another thing that goes back to my design years. You know, when you're designing, you have to anticipate misuse. Early on, when I was showing my paintings in Columbus, people would come up to me and say they're seeing some pretty bizarre things in the paintings. You know, I'd be condemning violence, and they'd think I was condoning violence, and this It's the weirdest thing. This one show. For one thing, I showed up for the show. It's supposed to be a one-person show in this big, nice restaurant cafe, and I show up and there are like lights and cameras and there. I thought, "Whoa, is this for me? I'm not ready for this," you know. But no, it was for the owner's daughter who like scotch taped a crayon drawing on the wall, and it was now her show, you know. So that was weird. And then partway through, a busboy, I assume he was, you know, with a white jacket and everything, came up and he was sweating and nervous, and it was like acting like he was unsure about approaching me. And finally, he got up the nerve and he said, "I've been following you around, you know, your art." And you know, he started asking me about like hidden messages, and I see guns and all these paintings. You know, I was like, no. If I, you know, I'm gonna put him back on planet Earth. Wow, that's a Woody Allen line. But then a few minutes later, these Guerrilla Girls, if you know who they are, feminist radical art group from New York, and their big revelation was that art history is full of men, you know, and there were women, lots, you know, but that's their big thing, and you know, they show up at shows that they think aren't being fairly curated, you know, in New York City. I don't know why they were in Columbus. I read that they were in Columbus on some business, but they came up and they wanted to know why this one painting of mine was condoning domestic violence. You know, I wasn't. I was condemning it. You know, and yeah, you know, it was a bit heavy-handed. It was a parody of American Gothic, and I was calling it American Gothic. You know, yeah. After that, I harkened back to my design lessons. You know, you got to design anticipating misuse. I have to think about misunderstanding when I'm, you know, starting a painting. Potential misunderstanding. Can this be misconstrued somehow? You know, because I'm not always going to be there to explain it like that. And that's actually when I started doing these write-ups too. You know, just to make that point, even when I'm online, you know, I'm not always going to be there to set them straight. And the way facts are spun these days, you know, an artist could get into a whole lot of trouble.
And that bothers you that your work could be misinterpreted. Some artists might say, "I don't care what you think of my work. It's not. That doesn't bother me. What I think of my work." You're like, "I don't want to be thought of as a domestic."
Yeah, because it serves two purposes. And when I'm done with a painting, I'm done with a painting. You know, I used to, Lou might even remember this, in the dorm, people would say, yeah, you must treasure these drawings. No, I'm done with it. I'm going to burn this drawing unless you buy it from me. You know, for 50 cents. And, you know, yeah, we don't believe you, Stephen. And, yeah, I'd light it up and burn the drawing. And no, literally, I'm done with them when I'm done painting them. And the painting will tell me when it's done. And I got that from my art teacher, Joseph Fitzpatrick, too. He said every artist should have someone behind them with a hammer to hit them over the head when they're done, you know. Because the worst thing artists do is just overwork something, especially art students, you know. Well, you know, we came back from drawing. I mentioned we'd go out drawing, come back to a painting the following week at the Carnegie. And they had these easels set up, and it was just tempera paint, you know, and you had an hour and a half. And, you know, I did this painting the teacher thought was like great. It only took 25 or 30 minutes. And he said, stop right there. What I want you to do is clean your brush and throw your paint away and just walk around and look at what everybody else is doing because you're done, you know. And he was right. He was absolutely right. Not that he was a minimalist.
So when you were in Hong Kong, what years were these? Were there? First half of the 90s, just could you place it?
It was, I'd say like 2001, am I right about that? Yeah, so it was after the turnover, you know, and the mainland had this hands-off attitude then because they wanted the whole world to see business as usual, no problem, you know. But they got impatient because they do have patience. Beijing has patience. 100-year programs. We can't even pull off a 4-year program. The next guy in office reverses everything. So they have these 100-year programs. One was phasing out Cantonese language in Hong Kong. That was a 100-year program. But they've accelerated that now. They know the whole world moves faster now.
Diane?
What inspired you to do Thich Nhat Hanh?
Well, I met him in Hong Kong, and actually I've always had probably a little more than a passing interest in Buddhism. Meditation is really a great art and design tool. If you want to clear your head and just like look at something, untainted by your other thoughts, unbiased, it's a good way to do it. Just like, clear your mind and, okay, just lay something in front of you and, this is what you're going to think about, Steve. But I met him in Hong Kong. We heard he was giving a talk with his team from France. And it was just a real good, feel-good moment. And just meeting him, and his communication is real simple. If you've ever heard him talk or read his books, real simple, perfect for a Zen teacher, because his command of English isn't that great. He doesn't want an interpreter, So it's a good DIY kind of delivery. But, he was slightly built. Shake his hand, it's very small, but his eyes are so hard, His eyes were so hard because, when you think about what he's been through, watching his brother monks burn themselves in the streets and stuff like that, you don't get nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize without, seeing some things.
What can you tell me about the lady here?
This one. That's Joanne Shenandoah. It's funny that you picked on that right after this because I saw her perform. The Dalai Lama gave a big 5-hour music thing with a talk, an hour-long talk at Syracuse. And I went for the music. I didn't know he was really going to be there, and that was kind of interesting because I was so close. But David Crosby played, and she played, and other world musicians, Dave Matthews did, and I've never heard him play alone. I really liked that because I got tired of his band with the saxophone and stuff. Okay. It's kind of funny because he was so nervous because it's the first time his parents ever saw him play. And I thought, you're like 45 years old now. You've been in a spotlight for 25 years and your parents never saw you. Yeah. She was there, and again, that's another upstate New York thing. She's an Oneida Indian, Oneida Reservation, Wolf Clan, for those scoring at home. And we have property near there, but on what was Seneca land, the Allegheny National Forest. And, we have it all diced and subdivided into like topographical maps. And I'm looking at that now, and I want to like reinforce that part of it, So it's kind of like a Turtle Island, which is Earth in native mythology. It's their Earth and our Earth, and I don't know, it just came off that way.
I just have a comment. I would encourage everyone to actually read what Steve says about his paintings, because it's always very interesting. I'm not sure I'm smart enough all the time to understand all of it, but it's definitely worth doing, getting on the website.
Well, I don't even understand it. A lot of no, and that's we're Americans. We like cartoons. I knew this Swiss designer in Columbus who grew up during World War II in Switzerland. And when he was a little kid, he thought animals in America could talk because he saw Bambi, And, what's a little kid to conclude? Animals in America can talk, But we've grown up with cartoons, and you know, from a very, very early age, everybody understands them, everybody's seen them, and the bright colors. If that's all people walk away with, I'm pleased. You know, I'm happy with that. I'm not trying to hoodwink anybody or anything, and sneak a subliminal message like guns and stuff in. Well, can I finish by reading a poem?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This one is written by Dante Alighieri, and it's the Inferno. It'll just take 17 hours. Canto 1. Midway upon the journey, no, I'm not going to do that to you. I made the joke. Get in, get out.
Well, thank you. Can I get you to stand out here and get a picture of you with your crowd?